It's time for Cats Talk Wednesday. Small town and big city joined forces. Vinny Hardy of Lynch, Kentucky, and Terry Brown of Louisville, Kentucky, team up to give you free-flowing, laid-back sports talk. Focus on Kentucky Wildcats, as well as pertinent information in the NBA, NFL, and Major League Baseball.
And welcome in to Cats Talk Wednesday. Terry TB Brown, Vinny Hardy, here doing what we do for another episode. We're talking about Kentucky. The show revolves around the Cats. We'll get to some other stuff as well. As y'all know, we hit music, we hit comedy. If you listened last week, we had comedians on. Roy Jr., Greg Warren, Ole Miss Evie, which she got the win over us, and our Cats came up short again to those Rebels. Corey Price, who we got to get back on here, statistician extraordinaire. I saw him tweet out that this is the first time Kentucky has lost 3 straight games to the same opponent by 3 points or less. I said, "Oh, Corey, that's a tough pill to swallow, man. 3 straight games, because they beat us by the 42-41 game, and then there's been 2 games where they won by 3. 22-19 Saturday, and then 37-34. So 3 straight games to Ole Miss by 3 points or less. So that's And Kentucky had a million chances to get them Saturday. It was right there.
Yeah, for me, and I think most of the Kentucky fans out there, at least the ones with sense, here I go fan policing, I'm still encouraged by what I saw. After the first quarter, no more touchdowns on the defensive side. And despite all the miscues, of which there were more than a handful, Kentucky still had a chance to win.
Mm-hmm.
And so if your takeaway is same old Kentucky, or your takeaway is this loss is a setback to the program, I don't know what game you saw. Nothing about what happened on Saturday would lead you to believe that Kentucky hasn't improved as a program and is not competitive with that middle tier program. And what I mean by middle tier is, if we assume that the Alabamas, Ohio States, and Georgias, and even Georgia struggled on Saturday.
Wow.
But if we assume that those teams are at the top, which I think we all make that assumption, and then you've got a bunch of teams kind of not crumpled, but kind of jumbled all together in that mid-level, Kentucky's one of those teams where if things go right, everything goes right, you can win in a blowout. If a couple of things go wrong, you're going to have to scratch and claw a W. But if a bunch of things go wrong, you're going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's where Kentucky is. I've been saying this probably since the first 10-win season under Stoops. Eventually, wins and losses games just have to be just that, wins and losses. You can't extrapolate out a win or a loss and what it means as a program. We're beyond that. I wouldn't think that a win over Tennessee this year would be a program-defining win. I wouldn't say that. No. Nor would I say a loss to Ole Miss is a program-defining loss. I don't think we're to that point. Now, the only caveat is, if you lose to Louisville, that's going to be some soul-searching. You lose this weekend to South Carolina, soul-searching. So, but what I'm saying is, we're beyond the point of what does this mean for Mark Stoops' legacy? That's done. We are who we are.
Mm-hmm.
I said on Round of Shots on Sunday, if you watch the Ole Miss game and you decide you're out on Kentucky, then you weren't really on to begin with.
Yeah.
Because for me, the defense is elite. 1 or 2 breakdowns, Ole Miss got but after that, shut them down.
Yeah.
On the road. Mm-hmm. So if you've got an elite defense, which we have, and they're not fully healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've got Will Levis, who the fumbles, obviously, Will has got to get the clock in his head working a little bit better.
Right.
He got to get rid of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
He's got that Ben Roethlisberger in him, and it's sometimes you just need to chuck it, get back to the line, let's do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Or got to get rid of it. But that's what happens. We see the big, strong quarterbacks, they hold on to the ball long because they know they're big and strong and they have confidence in their arm. And we've seen Will in situations where the pocket is collapsing and he's still able to chuck that ball 60 yards downfield.
Yeah.
But if he's going to make that step to the next level, the clock's got to get better in his head.
Mm-hmm.
So the fumble where he was running for the first down gets hit, I don't fault him for that. That's making a play. You get airborne. Okay, that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Some folks, we had C-Rod, run it with C-Rod. Well, the play worked. It was a good play call.
Yeah, that was a different one. I think I questioned where they tried a little quick throw to a receiver on 3rd and 2. And I thought, well, that one maybe you give it to C-Rod.
Right.
And it didn't work,
but C-Rod looked good.
He did.
Coming back, you figured that the conditioning wasn't going to quite be there. It's a tough ask to come in on the road against a top 15 opponent. And I thought he handled himself very well. But you got Will Levis, who is talented. You've got C-Rod, was he the second leading rusher in the SEC last year, first team all SEC this year, in the backfield now. And we've got 3 wideouts that are as talented of a trio as we've ever had.
Mm-hmm. Your Cuz, Baron Brown, Dan Key, Tavion Robinson. The only thing too, I don't think I saw this. And is it a criticism? Yeah. But maybe roll Levis out from time to time. I don't think, maybe roll him out to his left or to his right. What do we call it? Move the pocket a little bit, especially when your right tackle goes out, when you're down there with a chance to win, and that's who gets beat and gives up that fumble. Maybe roll him to the left away to help that new guy coming in cold off the bench trying to block the defensive end. Maybe, make it a little hard to get him. I don't think they rolled him out. And because Will can move, we know he can run and we can move. And he's got the arm to throw on the run going either direction. Maybe if I had one little thing, and look, I'm no offensive coordinator.
Right.
They me to be one. But I thought maybe mix that in and, just to get him a little different look, make it to where they don't just have to know he's dropping back 3-5 steps and that's where he's going to be, but other than that.
And I would ask friend of the show, Max Godby, because I know a lot of people talked about, rolling out. My thing is, if you're an offensive lineman coming in cold, is that something that you want to ask somebody to do? Is to roll and move? Mm-hmm. Is it easier just to attempt? Look, I know he got beat, right?
Right.
Okay, but is it an easier ask to do that versus roll one way or the other?
Yeah.
And I think you may. I don't know, and I'd be interested to kind of get feelings on it, because that's the point I made. Like, okay, we're just saying roll him out, but is that a tougher ask for someone just walking into a game to do?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But
I don't know if he rolls out. I don't know if he's rolled out a lot all year. That might not be Scangarillo's deal. I don't know. So.
Well, and that's the thing too, is we haven't seen that period. So is that even something that's in the repertoire for the offense to do at this point?
Yeah.
I know it's easy to say let's do that, but
I think we've seen,
I don't know.
Yeah, I think we've seen some bootlegs, but I don't know, just straight rollouts. But that's kind of quibbling. But I'm just also kind of wondering, and to your point, people that think it's the same old Kentucky. If it's the same old Kentucky, they get blown out 52-13 because they never get themselves back in the game. It was kind of like a basketball game. You got an up-tempo team against a team who wants to slow it down. Mm-hmm. Who's gonna impose the style of play on who. Is the up-tempo team going to run them out the gym? Is the grounded-out team going to slow it down and make it more like that half-court game? Ole Miss in the first quarter looked like, okay, we're going to run. But to Kentucky's credit, Mark Stoops made it a Mark Stoops game. If you would have told any of us that Ole Miss was going to be held to 22 points, 20, because the defense didn't give up that safety, you're going to hold Ole Miss's offense to 20 points, you had to like your chances they're going to come out with a W in that situation. Similar to the Florida game. You don't want them to get punched in the mouth and have a deficit. You're down 16-7 in the swamp. That's not ideal. You're down 19-6 at Ole Miss. Not ideal. But the fact that you get back into those games, you win the game at Florida, should have won at Ole Miss is a testament to, like Stoops said, the heart, the resiliency, the fighting back. Got to be more precise and play cleaner. But the fact that they didn't quit and roll over and made it their kind of game is what you want to see.
And that's the thing too, is, I saw a bunch of folks when Kentucky was down at the half against Mississippi State or Ole Miss. Same old Kentucky. This happens all the time. And I asked somebody, I saw, what do you mean? What do you mean? And the reference point was always, or is, some game in the 90s, some game in the 2000s, heck, some game in the 80s. And I said, well, yeah, I see what you're saying there. We did, and let one turnover turn into 28 points. I got you. But my point is, for this team, at halftime of the Ole Miss game, down, was it 19-12 at half? Is that what it was? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Okay. For this team, I'm thinking what they did at Florida has more of an impact than what happened 25 years ago. I'm thinking that what we did in the bowl game to score late and to hold on defensively has more to do with this team than what happened 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So my point on that is, yes, there's really no reason as a Kentucky fan to continually go back to the 80s, 90s. If you start telling me, well, Bill Curry, I'm not listening.
Right.
If it's, well, Guy Morris, God rest his soul, or, even Joker Phillips or whoever, Rich Brooks, I'm not having that conversation, because you're bringing out stuff from, at this point, at least a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm asking for folks to do is look what the team has done in the last 2 or 3 seasons. What have they done? They've overcome a lot. And I'm like, Florida was 3 weeks ago. What are we doing?
Right. Yeah.
like we just saw that.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, if you want to say same old Kentucky, that's your deal. That's whatever. But what I'm saying is, this team fights. That is the one thing that Mark Stoops has brought to Kentucky. We have not had to endure those 55-3 games.
Mm-hmm.
There was Florida during the COVID year and maybe Alabama. But other than that,
yeah,
how many of those games have we had to endure?
Haven't been many long afternoons like there used to be. And
right.
We had Tom Leach on a couple weeks ago, and y'all can watch on demand on BS3 Network, listen on Anchor and wherever you get your podcast. And I'll never forget, it was Georgia wasn't even the Georgia they are now, but it was a game at Georgia. Was it still Joker? Might have still been Joker's era. And it was 27-3, 34-3, third or fourth quarter. And we all know Tom, who's always wanted to be the voice of the Cats. Like, that was, he even said, my focus was narrow-minded in the fact that I wanted this job and this job only. He was able to be the voice of the Cats. So he's doing what he loves, dream job. in between the hedges in Athens, calling the game. But Georgia went in for a touchdown. I think I might have been working that Saturday. I wasn't even watching. And he just said, he sounded so weary and beaten down. He just, and touchdown dogs. That'll make it 33-3. They'll be on for the extra point. I never, he sounded so broken because there was no chance Kentucky was going to win, no chance for a comeback, no chance for a really good, successful season. He's doing what he loves, but it was the suffering.
Yeah. It's brutal.
Yeah.
And we're not to that point. Also, same old Kentucky, you lose to Ole Miss, you turn and look at the rest of the schedule. Kentucky can still get to 10 regular season wins.
Yeah.
There's not a team out there, and I've been saying this, you and I have been saying it the whole since the offseason. There's not a team out there that if I told you Kentucky beat them, you would be shocked.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Georgia, but we saw Georgia look really bad for about 3.5 quarters at Missouri.
Man.
Winning in the SEC on the road is hard. Whether you're going to Vanderbilt, whether you're going to wherever, winning is hard. So there's a chance that when the Tennessee game rolls around, Kentucky's going to be, I think, 7-1 at this point. Or what? I don't know how the schedule is off the top of my head. But my point is, there's still a lot to play for. Even with the Ole Miss game, again, disappointing. I'm not trying to downplay how frustrating a game it was to watch because it was a winnable game.
Yeah, it was right there.
So I understand the frustration, and immediately like, but you still have to step back and see where we are on this progress. Talking to Kevin Hale at Round of Shots, and his thing is, the program obviously has progressed, but his mindset and other people, okay, it's when do we make that biggest jump? And I'm like, this is the big jump. Getting to the point where 9 or 10 wins every year is mandated is a huge jump. There are so many teams, as I was talking about earlier, there are so many teams in that next tier that have been there for generations.
Yeah.
There are so many teams that get in that, 8, 9, 10 win range. Things break right. Okay, great season. Might go down to 7. That's not a bad place to be in. And it's not accepting mediocrity. It's accepting that this is where 95% of college football lives.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And what you're asking Kentucky to do, essentially, is jump up to Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and Clemson.
And we just made it to the 95%.
Right. Because the point I make is USC is not in that 10 win every year category.
Mm-hmm. This is their first year being relevant in a long time.
Michigan is not in the 10 win every year category. Notre Dame is not in the 10 win every year category. Mm-hmm. My point being, I get what you're saying. We want to get to the point where we can get 10 wins in a regular season. That's admirable. But folks want to make this transition to 10 wins being the floor. That is insane to me. We're not there yet.
Yeah.
We may never get there because, again, there are programs, historically great programs, that aren't there. And it's not about accepting mediocrity. It's about accepting this is who we are with all these other teams. We are to the point now where the 1AA or the FCS, whatever they call them, we're winning those games. Okay? We're now to the point where we are winning those MAC games. Right? We're to the point now where we are consistently beating Vanderbilt. which again has not been a thing for a big chunk of Kentucky football history. A better program than Vanderbilt, a better program than South Carolina, who we'll talk about. We got a guest coming up, talk about the Gamecock game. A better program. Who else am I missing? South Carolina. Missouri. Right? Better programs than those. A better program than the University of Florida at this moment in time.
Yeah.
So I keep saying, look at where we are, look at where we're coming. And people are saying, well, we're not there yet. I feel, I'm going to get a little preachy here, Vinny. I feel like Moses with the people, and they're like, we're not to the promised land yet. Slow down. It is a process to get there. Are we there yet? Well, look at those people over there. Focus on our journey. I got into it with Kevin. I don't know if you saw this on the Twitter streets. And Kevin, he's great. We need to have Kevin on here. He's great for hosting Round of Shots. But somebody, I think it might have been Jared. I hate to pick on you, Jared Baker. Long time. He always listens to us. But it tweeted out, it seems like Kentucky is the only team that makes a random person look like a Heisman Trophy winner. And Kevin said, you're right. And I said, y'all need to watch more football. Well, what do you mean? What do you mean? Look, there's very little that ails Kentucky football that doesn't happen with other teams. Other teams have turnovers. Other teams let random people shine against them. Like, that's not unique to Kentucky. Well, it just seems like we struggle sometimes. Yeah, like, and my point being, we watch Alabama, have these 55-3 wins. There are sometimes Alabama will leave Starkville, Missouri with the woo. Right? I mean, it just happens sometimes. And my point is, because I'm an English teacher, words mean. My mother is an English teacher. Words mean things. If you say, "Is Kentucky the only?" Unequivocally, I'm gonna say no. I'm just gonna say no. Like Kentucky basketball, there's always some random person that goes berserk in Rupp Arena. We know that's a Kentucky thing. No. Random small school playing in North Carolina. That, like, talk to other fans of other schools, and what you think is unique to your school, other people deal with. I've talked to Iowa fans that are like, man, we made the quarterback at Northwestern look great. He had 5 touchdowns again. Like, every fan base has these stories. It's personal to us because I don't know about you, but Kentucky is the only game I'm watching like this.
Yeah. Every
week in, week out. That's, I watch the other games, but whatever. But Kentucky, I'm watching every play, and Kentucky's the only team I'd be like, Vinny, you remember the one play where he rolled out, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's I don't have the capacity to do that for a lot of teams. My point is, watch other college football teams, and you will see most teams are in that same little area. I'm doing this, and I know people listen to us audio. I'm making a little box with my hand. Anyway, most teams are in that area where you can maybe absorb 1 or 2 mistakes. 3 mistakes puts a win in jeopardy. That's where most teams are. And it's not that, again, that you're accepting mediocrity. It's just, this is how football works. The margins are razor thin.
Yep.
Watch the NFL, the best of the best.
And this year.
But every year you can go in and you can see, when the Colts were going 13-3, with Peyton Manning, you could look at maybe 7 plays on the season that if they go differently, that's a 9-17.
Yep.
The margins at these levels are thin. Because again, if you're not getting 10 5 stars a year, which the most schools aren't, you're trying to figure out the best way to win and trying to compare what Alabama and Ohio State do. You can't do that.
Right. That'd be like the Colts getting 10 first-round draft picks in a row.
Right.
And nobody else doing that. Of course, they're going to separate from everybody. Yeah.
And so you increase your margin of error with the talent, right? Like going back to Kentucky basketball 2015. Oh, the Harrisons are kind of struggling. Let's just go to Booker and Euless, right? Like Cat's not getting it done. Like, you bring in Trey Lyles, who's been in the NBA a lot. Like when you can do that, you're playing differently. Like we understand that when it comes to basketball, football, the same kind of way, right? We don't, Bryce Young gets hurt for Alabama against Arkansas and the backup quarterback comes in and scores like 3 or 4 touchdowns. That's a nice luxury to have.
I'm probably gonna still punk Jimbo and them this weekend too.
Oh, you're gonna enjoy that. And keep in mind now, when we start talking about, when I tell people Alabama's playing differently, I remember when they benched Jalen Hurts and brought in Tua in that championship game. What a bleeping luxury is that? Like, are you what?
Freshman. Like, used to be right-handed. He just left-handed for the heck of it and throwing dimes.
It's like the 2001 Miami Hurricanes. If Willis McGahee can't do it and Frank Gore can't do it, then we've got
Clinton Portis.
Like, what? Come on now. Come on. That's playing at a different level. Most teams are at that level. So while I'm frustrated that Kentucky had, if you want to say 4 or 5 head scratchers, but I'm encouraged because Kentucky was good enough to overcome 4.
Yeah.
But you can't, but unless you are super talented, you can't overcome 5. And that's where we are right now. And again, it's not accepting mediocrity. It's not any of that. It's just saying this is where we are as a program. And nothing I saw on Saturday would lead me to say Kentucky doesn't belong on the same field as Ole Miss.
The struggle to get where they are now. Stoops has been here 10 years. And to probably be consistently winning 8, 9, 10 games a year now, getting in that neighborhood that you were talking about, we saw the struggle. It just happened before our eyes from 2012 until now. But yet they're supposed to make this next leap overnight. It doesn't make sense. How you can't expect that to be when you just saw what it took you 10 years to do, and now you're going to be on Georgia, Alabama level in a snap of a finger. It's not possible.
And honestly, you have to slow cook stuff. You got to slow cook stuff. Again, I hate the whole, you just accepted mediocrity. No, you have to understand these things take time. We're not getting blown out. That's in the past. Mm-hmm. We're not having those bonehead mistakes like not covering Florida receivers. Mm-hmm. Right? Now we're just losing games that you're like, man, a couple of different plays, we win that one. That's a step in the progress. You and I have talked before. I don't understand how people that are parents don't understand how this works. When your kids come home, learning their ABCs, like, daddy, yes, I know A, B, C, D, E. Well, great. I don't then say, well, why aren't you reading yet?
Right.
Why? Because I understand it's a process.
Mm-hmm.
All this stuff is a process. No matter what you do in life, it is a process.
Yep.
Right? Like, you all have been married, was it 20 years?
Yeah, 21 this year. Yep.
21 years. Are you all the same couple you were at year 1?
No.
Right. You've
all.
been through some things.
Yeah.
You've done some things.
And you think you know everything when you 24 and think you got everything together. Think you got your ducks in a row, and then life slap you upside the head and you get knocked down and you have to get up and you get knocked down again and I'll get up again. And yeah, no.
And we understand it's a process.
Yo.
Whether you start a new job, whether you move out to a cornfield, there's a process to this stuff. And I'm sure your dad taught you the same thing my dad did. You can't cheat the process. I've said it before, I'll say it again. You can't go from 2 wins to 10 wins without cutting corners. Right?
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about the blue bloods, you don't cut corners to become a blue blood. No matter what it is. Kentucky, Kansas, North Carolina. Been doing it since the rules of basketball were written, right?
Yep.
You have to build that consistency. Every program that was horrible when you and I are kids that are now pretty solid, you got to put that work in.
Mm-hmm.
And you see it when you've got other teams like a Nebraska football, Indiana basketball,
Yeah,
that are trying to do these quick fixes. That's not the way this works. That's not how any of this works, right? You've got to put the work in. And again, I'm encouraged. I think Kentucky's going to cruise toward I think 5-1 after South Carolina. I'm encouraged by that.
Mm-hmm.
And we got our guests coming up. We got Miss Katie Dzwierzynski. It only took about 8 times for me to, for her being on the show, for me to be able to pronounce the her name right. But she covers South Carolina sports, Garnet and Black Attack. So we'll have her on to talk about the South Carolina game. But before we do that, I want to talk about this is my soapbox. I want to talk about the basketball schedule, men's basketball schedule.
Yeah.
It came out, and the chorus of folks talking about the schedule, the refrain's always the same. I remember when Kentucky used to play all these top-ranked teams at home in Rupp Arena. We used to have 4, 5, 6 ranked teams come in every year, blah, 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 blah. I always said, you can go to bigbluehistory.net, look up the schedules for yourself, and see that's not accurate. So the good folks at the bigbluehistory.net said,
does the website give more references from a Kentucky podcast? Does anybody reference bigbluehistory.net more than us?
I don't know. But I love it.
Yes.
And basically, because I got bored one day, I think last year, year before, I just went through randomly picking out 2 or 3 years in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. Based on just my, looking at maybe 15, 16 different seasons, you had to go back to Joby Hall, where there were 3 ranked opponents coming into Rupp Arena.
Right.
Mm. Now, keep in mind, for my numbers, I did not count Louisville and Indiana when we were playing them regularly.
Okay.
At home. Because Louisville game is going to be Louisville game. Indiana was Indiana, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You got to go back that far. And I told people, look, I put this out there. I put it on this podcast. If you can find one of these home records that had 3 ranked opponents, not including Louisville, not including IU, 3, $20 to the charity of your choice. But bigbluehistory.net, the Twitter account came back to me and said, well, he had looked at that before.
Of course,
you got to go back. You got to go back to the 70s when things were more concentrated. The 70s, Vinny. And you're like, oh, wow. No. The early to mid 70s, which means that schedule predates Rupp Arena.
That's right.
So Rupp Arena has never seen a home slate like people are convinced that it happened.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And look, you can feel how you want to feel.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. like Tony said, it feels good. Yeah. Feel how you want to feel. But numbers never lie. Men lie, women lie, numbers never lie. So when people say, well, way back when, you are essentially going back into the early 70s for this kind of mythical home schedule where we played nothing but heavyweights in the non-conference.
It's like when the tail end of Rupp or Joe B's first couple years.
Yes. Yes. You're going back to Adolph Rupp. So again, if you're in your 70s and 80s, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But if you are our age or younger, you have never, ever seen a home schedule like you claim it was when you grew up.
Yeah.
It's not happening.
Mm-hmm. So people claiming, well, we played Louisville, Indiana, and North Carolina, which not all those would be a Rupp every single year anyway. It's
right.
That whole December thing, Louisville, Indiana, Carolina, but in their minds, it was Louisville, it was Indiana, it was Carolina, UCLA, and it was Kansas, and it was Duke. My whole childhood, it was that every year at home.
And look, it didn't happen like that. I've seen people talking about football. Is Coach Scangrinello? Are they trying to do more to make Will Levis look good? And then you go to the stats broadcast against Ole Miss, first, second, third quarter, Kentucky rushed more than they passed. They only did that in the fourth quarter because we were down and we're passing to try to win. So you can feel like we're doing more passing, but that's not what is happening. And I got a message. I believe our guest is joining the line. Yeah. So let's bring on Katie Dzwierzynski of the Garnet and Black Attack.
Hey, guys.
Hello. Welcome to the show for the, I don't know. What are we up to, Vinny? Do we know? 7? 6, 7? It's got to be a lot. It's got to be a lot.
I brought another guest with me also. We have a bonus guest.
Oh, where's Sammy at?
Man, Sammy in the kitchen. You know that dog ain't doing nothing. Ever since I moved down here, Vinny, it's too cold. He likes to stay upstairs. But at any rate, Katie, welcome to the show yet again. It's always good to have you on here, especially as we get ready for the Cats and the Gamecocks.
Thank you for having me again.
Absolutely. So I got to ask you about your former quarterback, Stephen Garcia, who's been on the Twitter streets for some reason poking the Kentucky fans. But how does South Carolina folks feel about Stephen Garcia? Because we've got some people that played for Kentucky that, Vinny, we don't always claim. But so how does South Carolina feel about the Stephen Garcia era in South Carolina?
I feel like there are a couple camps of people. Some people are like, he was fun. He did some good stuff. We happened to be really good at the time, so we're willing to excuse some of the dumber stuff because we also have big memories. He was there for Alabama. He was there for some of the other big games. So people, I think, especially since that was so long ago now, people are just like, we'll remember the good stuff. And yeah, was he dumb sometimes? Sure. But I guess he didn't do anything that terrible. He and I were in school at the same time. And like, I always kind of thought like, okay, you're the guy, like you look like an idiot and you're supposed to be the quarterback and we finally are good. And like, you're doing stuff that's so dumb. But in the grand scheme of things, I think most people have kind of just like, he's funny now. And he didn't ever trash the school. He didn't ever trash Spurrier, even though it kind of ended badly at the end of Steven's time and Steve's time at South Carolina. Steven never, railed against South Carolina. He still cheers for the Gamecocks. He still follows them. So I think that does say, even though it wasn't maybe the ending he wanted as the quarterback or that just the fan base wanted for him, it seems like the relationship is still good. So overall, I think that's a positive, even if some of the stuff he did when he was 21 was dumb. But he never seemed like malicious or angry towards the school, which even as someone who did used to find him kind of annoying, I do appreciate that he has seemed like a devoted fan of the team and follows them. and, has never trashed them. Even the years that we were pretty bad after he left, it didn't seem like there was ill will. So I do appreciate that. And I think a lot of the fan base kind of enjoys that he is pretty interactive on Twitter. I mean, he'll respond to just like regular fans. So I think that's nice that he does just seem like kind of a regular guy who's one of us following the team.
So you've got Beamer there. You got Little Beamer. Is he Little Beamer, Vinny? I don't know how Beamer Jr. I don't know how we do that. So he seems pretty cool. He's the TikTok king. He's got that social media sizzle. But other than that, how are the fans warming up to this version of Beamer ball?
Well, I think it helps that he also was at South Carolina a decade ago. So he's kind of a familiar face, and he was at South Carolina when we were really good. So part of his thing was like, I've seen it. I know we can do it here. His dream was to come back and coach at South Carolina. So I think there's a lot of goodwill there just because he is a Gamecock. He was born in South Carolina. So there's a lot of like, he's one of us kind of thing. And last year, winning 7 games, including the bowl, was so far beyond what so many people thought was going to happen. And such a different vibe overall from the Will Muschamp years, where it was kind of like not very positive and we weren't doing a lot of winning. And it was sort of not a team aspect. It really seemed more like a bunch of guys on the field at the same time. Whereas Beamer's whole thing is like, we're brothers, we're out here together. There are times with that whole thing where like when we're getting blown out by Georgia, the like love your brother thing only goes so far. And it's like, okay, but what are you doing to like actually make progress here? But overall, I mean, I think Beamer is viewed pretty positively. I think the one thing against him is that our offensive coordinator, most people don't like. And Beamer and our offensive coordinator are like super good friends, like in each other's wedding level friends. So there's a weird like, okay, the guy doesn't want to fire his friend, but his friend's not really getting the job done. So I think if there were to be a point of criticism, it's that like after the offense wasn't great last year, everyone wanted our offensive coordinator gone pretty much immediately, which one season isn't really fair. We didn't have like an official quarterback last year. So he had stuff kind of stacked against him. But I think there are people who, if our offensive coordination isn't better this year, are ready to say this is a flaw with Shane Beamer, that he's not addressing this big problem.
That sounds an awful lot, Vinny, like what's going on in Iowa with the Iowa offensive coordinator. Only his last name is the same name as the head coach. So that's going to be a tough one to get over. So admittedly, Katie, I've not watched a lot of South Carolina games this year. So what's the scouting report for South Carolina as they come to Lexington is it Saturday night? Is it a night game? Saturday night? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I should be better about that, Vinny. I should know the schedule. But South Carolina, what should we be looking for as Kentucky fans against South Carolina?
The good news is that we do not have a losing record right now. For us, that's good news. The bad news is we played Arkansas and Georgia back to back, and those games weren't good. And it showcased a lot of problems with offense and defense. We've blown out our past 2 opponents, but it was South Carolina State and Charlotte. So the competition was a little bit different. Our first game of the season was probably the best measuring stick, but we won that one, but it wasn't the blowout people wanted it to be. So our record is 3-2 right now, but our 2 losses were blowouts against better SEC teams than us. The offense and defense have both had issues. Obviously, we have Spencer Rattler, which was like a super exciting. We got a huge quarterback. Unfortunately, the offense hasn't really done, I think, what people want it to have done so far. Spencer's been a little inconsistent. The offensive line isn't great. There have been like when Spencer throws a good pass, it gets dropped or it gets picked off because the receiver wasn't paying attention. So our offense isn't quite there yet, but now we're about to be almost halfway through the season. So like the offense needs to get there. So I think we have some playmakers in place. We have running backs who are really good. We just don't have it like put all together, and it'll be like the defense will do a good job, but the offense is very slow to start. So the defense can only keep it up for so long. We scored our first quarter touchdown last week. We had not scored a touchdown in the first quarter until last week. And even that one didn't like go right off the bat. It took a little while. So a slow starting offense that has to play from behind a lot when the offense isn't the strongest unit on the field all the time has been a problem. Our first game of the season, we had like 2 blocked punts. The defense had a bunch of turnovers. It was great. It was all very Beamer ball-y. And then the defense kind of struggled against the SEC teams. So kind of seeing what they're made up of now that they've had a chance to play some not as high level competition, but also some really good competition. I think this will be a good test. I think Kentucky is a better team right now than South Carolina is, but I don't know that the gap is quite as big as like a Georgia South Carolina one was. So I think this will be a little better of a conference test for South Carolina versus like the Arkansas, Georgia, where it was kind of over pretty quickly.
Well, it's like a flip flop of, not that long ago where South Carolina was that second team behind, I guess might have been Florida, was back being Florida. And then Kentucky was with new coach Mark Stoops just trying to figure things out. It seems like things have flip-flopped in just a short period of time.
Yeah, it definitely does. And Kentucky has had our number for the past few years. And I think the fan base is very tired of that. Like, I think because it did used to be different. People were like, well, Kentucky's a win. Like, we can pencil in a few pretty confident wins, and Kentucky's one of them. And then that stopped being so much of a thing during the Will Muschamp years, but it still kind of has seemed like we can't get past Kentucky. So I think based on just like anecdotal tweets I've seen, a lot of people do feel like this is a good test of like, where are we at? Are we going back up towards where we used to be, where we want to be? Or are we still kind of bottom dwelling a little bit more than we want to be?
And that's with Kentucky tweets as well, Vinny, is, okay, we finally have moved above South Carolina. We got to keep them down there. That's the mindset I think a lot of Kentucky fans are going with. What about you, Vinny?
That's it. It's flipped, like y'all said, and I know it's driving everybody crazy down there. We had Mitch Brown on, who's in Lexington now at Fox 56, but he was a sports director in Columbia, so he's actually seen both sides. He covered the Gamecocks down there with Muschamp, and now he's up here, and he's been on both sides of it. So Kentucky fans definitely want to, keep the trend going. And to your point about kind of playing playing lesser competition, and then you went to Georgia and Arkansas. The South Carolina State game, they won 50-10, but wasn't that like 10-10 at halftime? It was still kind of like,
Yeah, it was another slow start, and South Carolina State was like in it. It was like a good game for them for a little while. And it was a weird week because the game got moved because of the hurricane. So it was like they played a few days sooner than they thought they were going to. But the slow starts were not unique to that game. Every game we've started slow. Even if we have like a good opening drive, it's a turnover or they like get stalled at midfield. So it's just trying to like get into the game a little more quickly, I think, is what the offense needs to do, because I don't think they can play from behind every week and really have like a real chance of winning a lot of the games.
And that spurs up.
I'm sorry, Vinny. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to go back to Garcia been on that Spurs Up podcast, the Spurs Up show. I went through some of their tweets and like, I don't know if it's objective or cynical or what their attitude is, but I saw they quote tweeted a tweet that said, it's been a decade since South Carolina, I think played in Atlanta or whatever back in 2012. And they said it's been a decade since we played well any kind of way. And then is Satterfield the offensive coordinator?
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a quote from the receiver talking about, we want to get him the ball. Satterfield talking about getting this Raheem dude the ball and blah, 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 and this, that, and the other. And then the Spurs Up is like, watch him get 0 targets on Saturday. So they're very skeptical about
I think that's the vibe around Satterfield generally. A lot of like, you said a good thing, but then you didn't do a good thing. And like Marshawn Lynch is such a good running back. And sometimes like, he can't do it all. And so they kind of just like, they'll run one good play and then it's like, well, that worked. Do that again. And they go like completely in a different direction with like a 3-yard pass when they need 8 yards. And it's like, why would you do that? This clearly wasn't going to work. So I think there's a lot of like, do the right play at the right time versus like just run whatever play and hope it works, because it's not working.
I think I cut you off, Terry.
I was going to switch it over to something more pleasant about South Carolina. What about Dawn Staley and the women's team becoming a thing, like becoming the new Tennessee? Can we say new Tennessee, Vinny? Like becoming that gold standard, yeah?
Yeah, we've had some lean years in the other big sports. Men's basketball hasn't been good for a long time. Baseball hasn't been great for a long time. Football wasn't doing great for a long time. So yeah, Dawn and the women's basketball team really have kind of like held it down for South Carolina in terms of national attention for a sport where they are winning. And I mean, when she came in, I was still in school, I think, and like the women's basketball team wasn't good. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to do great. And she obviously transformed it. So I think that also gives hope because we have a new men's basketball coach now too, after the Frank Martin years where it was like good and then it just progressively got less and less good. So I think there's hope too that like maybe men's basketball can kind of go on that trajectory too and see like, okay, Dawn built a program that wasn't really like highly regarded into, yeah, this like national powerhouse where they do get a ton of attention and they're winning championships. And it's a place people want to go, and that South Carolina is known as a women's basketball school now. Where like we used to, it was always, we'd play the UConns and other teams like that. And it was like, well, okay, they're UConn and this is just South Carolina. And now I think it is a much more like, well, this is South Carolina. And there is a lot more behind that. And like my mom watches all the women's basketball games now. I don't think she'd ever watched women's basketball before in her life, but now she's like, I'll go home and she'll be watching. So I think Dawn's really like, by building a culture there, it's brought in a lot of people who maybe wouldn't have cared or wouldn't have paid any attention to really appreciate what's happening there versus just like, oh, they won again, but to really want to like follow the team and know what's going on with them.
The young lady, the center,
Aaliyah Boston.
Yes.
Is that her name?
She is unbelievable. And her story coming from the Bahamas, and I think I saw something where she's back with her family, but she is, I mean, she's insane how good and talented that she is. I got to flip it back. I'm not trying to be negative. Terry made it pleasant by going back to basketball. I'm going to go back to football, but flashing back to last year with Beamer, I don't know what the expectations were. You guys, a new coach coming in, and, we know how that is. But he does go 6-6 and wins the bowl game. And us from the Kentucky perspective, there was a couple wins, like a real close win, I think, over Vanderbilt and Missouri that could have went the other way. And then maybe you're 4-8, and I don't know. Did this accelerate expectations too much by them having a better than expected year in year one to now everybody's expecting a whole lot, and maybe they're not exactly on schedule for that yet? Just what is the mindset to what year one was, and then it distorted expectations, I guess, what I'm trying to add.
Now, Kate, let me just interrupt by saying Vinny is salty because every year the national folks, the SEC folks, have been picking South Carolina to be better than Kentucky, and at some point we're like, okay, at some point, stop picking them to be better than us.
Won 7 in a row, and
he's like, at some point,
South Carolina,
what's it going to take for you guys? So that's where he's coming from with this.
That's fair.
Let me just give some background. And it's not just Vinny. It's like, what do we got to do? We've turned things around against South Carolina and against Vanderbilt, and against Missouri. What is it going to take to get that national thing? So I'm sorry, Vinny, but go ahead with the expectations. I just had to give her a little bit of background information about where salty Vinny was coming from.
I do think it probably accelerated a little bit. Like you said, that Vandy game last year, I was there. We won by 1 point on like the last drive of the game. It was like incredibly lucky with our graduate assistant quarterback coming off the bench to do it. Like it was kind of like if you didn't see it happen, you'd be like, no, that's not really a thing that happened. So I do think we won 2 games in Will Muschamp's final year. And then Beamer comes in and we win 6 in a bowl game, and it's great. So I do think the expectations probably were higher. I think also because we do have an actual quarterback this year versus last year when it was a graduate assistant and a bunch of guys who had never really played and like a converted wide receiver and all kinds of stuff. We were kind of playing with house money last year because it was like, you don't have a solid quarterback room. It's your first year. Some of these guys just got under Will Muschamp, like they just came in and now they have a new coach. So yeah, I think now the expectation is like you have stuff in place. Your staff's been here. You should do better, or at least do as well as you did last year. I will say one big change is that the team doesn't give up. Like even in the blowouts this year against Georgia, they kept playing the whole time. They were down like 35 points. They weren't coming back, but you could tell they were still out there making an effort, which I think people do. I see the tweets during the game. People do appreciate that like this team plays to win. They might not have any realistic chance of doing it, but they don't give up. Some of the Will Muschamp teams, you could tell, like they'd get down 30 points and they were like, well, it's the third quarter, but game's over. And you could just see that they were going out there and making plays, but it wasn't like for any real purpose. So I think there is a higher expectation, but I think there is also an appreciation that this team is at least trying to make progress and stay in games. So even if they're not going to be like 10-2 this year, they are going to make things competitive and make it like an actual, we can see there's a light where like, no, we didn't win this year, but next year, maybe we can win. Once we get, a couple more guys in here, people have more time. The guys who are freshmen now can get a little more experience. So I think the expectations really are just that like we keep seeing progress. It doesn't have to suddenly be a perfect season or, we don't have some other thing happen. But I think just that we're going in the right direction versus the past few years where it was kind of like going backwards. We won fewer games. We lost players. There was clearly like some unrest on the team. So I think there's also just an expectation that will be enjoyable to watch when it really wasn't for the past few years.
Right.
And
now,
I got to ask you,
Rattler.
Oh, see, Vinny, you
got
to work on this, man.
My bad. I'm sorry. My fault. I was just going to say Spencer Rattler coming from Oklahoma. They don't really play defense out there, and now he's coming to the SEC. And I mean, he's a legit quarterback compared to the grad assistant guy, but I don't know if it's going to go as well as everybody thinks for him down there coming into the SEC. That's just me. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I think he's not benefiting from our offensive line. I saw a stat today where they have not allowed a ton of sacks, which is great, but like he has been picked off or there's been other offensive issues. So I think like he's definitely had games where he could be better. He'll make a throw where like it went into double coverage and it was obviously going to get picked. So he's had some faults definitely, but I think he's also has been a little bit a victim of just some of the other offensive problems we also have.
Gotcha. I'm on.
No, I was just going to bring up one of my favorite South Carolina Gamecocks of all time, Deebo Samuel, who brings me joy every single week. I booed that guy something fierce on Saturdays. Root for him every Sunday. Yeah. That's weird how sports work, Vinny.
Yeah. There's some Vols that I'll root for on Sunday, not on like Jason Witten at Tennessee. I couldn't stand him. And as soon as he went to the Cowboys, yes, Jason, yes. Well, I understand, Terry.
Every weekend, if you follow me, I'm all Deebo this, Deebo that.
And poor Jalen Ramsey just got run over on that that little pass he hit. Just ran right through him like he wasn't even there, man.
We love to see it. So your other team, the Northwestern Wildcats, what's going on with Northwestern?
Nothing good.
Well, watching them in Ireland beat Nebraska, that you started off on a good note.
Yes. When that happened, I was like, this is either going to be a great sign of things to come and we're like running the table, or it's going to be the peak of the season and it's going to just fall off a cliff. And unfortunately, I think it's that second one. I saw a thing. I don't know if it was true, but I saw a tweet that said like the two games where they played Southern Illinois and Duke, maybe. No, I think it was Southern Illinois and whatever other like not real opponent they played. But it was like they paid them like millions of dollars to come, and then they lost both games at home. It was very embarrassing. My dad and I were considering going to one of the games, and I'm glad we didn't because it would have been really unpleasant to watch them like lose to Southern Illinois at home. I don't know what the deal is. They didn't seem to have like a ton of turnover that would have led to this, but they've been really, really bad. And they keep playing at the same time South Carolina does. So I'll watch South Carolina and like have an eye on Northwestern. But since South Carolina played on a Thursday last week, I watched the whole Northwestern game on Saturday and it was like almost good. And then they had like one or two bad plays and it just like went downhill from there. And I thought, oh, they're finally going to get on track, but no. Sadly, not. It might be a long season.
And see, Vinny, there's a difference between SEC football and Big Ten football. Big Ten football, if you don't have a rooting interest, is almost unwatchable. Not talking about Ohio State, Michigan. I'm talking about everybody else playing everybody else. Like, why are we watching this?
You don't like to watch punts from the 30-yard line?
The only good thing about going to that Iowa game was waving to the sick kids. That was the only good. That was the 2 safety day, which was. Yeah. Big Ten football is different.
2-for-1 safeties. 2-for-1 safeties. Get in and get to your seats. 2-for-1 safeties, everybody.
and the weather's turning here. It's getting ready to get a little bit chillier. And that means that the Hallmark Network is getting ready to do its thing as fall comes. So are you gearing up for another season of 45 different movies where businesswoman goes home and runs into someone she went to high school with that builds sleds for orphans or whatever? It's almost a Mad Libs. I could write one of those. I can't do a lot of things, Vinny. I can write one of those movies.
Casting for that, man. You got a good thing going. Get some casting calls ready.
Yeah. I might have to do one about a guy that meets somebody on Twitter and moves across the country. Anyway. But are you ready for the holiday? Because seems to start earlier every year, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it starts later this month. I think it usually starts before Halloween or right around Halloween, just when you're ready for Christmas. So yeah, last year's movies, I did not actually watch a ton because a lot of them, even to me, looked pretty bad. So hopefully this year there will be a better, relatively speaking, selection of instant classics, I'm sure, to watch on Hallmark. If Northwestern is really bad, at least I'll have those to turn on. It can't be worse than watching them punt from like the 40-yard line repetitively.
Now, Northwestern, going back to them real quick. Pat Fitzgerald, is he still there as long as he wants to be there? Is he gonna go to Nebraska? I heard his name in that. Do y'all want him to go, or is everybody still wanting to stay? What's the status on him?
I mean, I personally feel like he's the favorite son and like he's there until they tell him to get lost, and they'll never tell him to get lost. So unless he like really got a good offer, I feel like he's staying there forever. If he like loses 10 games 3 years in a row, I feel like that would then be a different conversation because even Northwestern is probably not going to like that so much. But I kind of feel like he gets a year here and there to be like really bad, and then they get good again, so he kind of like builds it back up. Yeah. I mean, I like Pat Fitzgerald. I think it would be weird to have a different coach there just because I'm so used to him being the guy. I think there might be a breaking point but I think it would have to be a lot of bad seasons or like something legitimately bad would have to happen like under his watch for Northwestern to be like, okay, we're done. I also don't know who else would want to coach Northwestern, particularly if they are having some bad years. I don't know that it's like an ideal fixer-upper job to come into. And since he's just so entrenched and I think is kind of part of Northwestern football, like when you think of Northwestern football, you think of Pat Fitzgerald. So I think there is sort of that marketing aspect there that he's like the guy versus some schools where like you maybe don't have a coach where like you would associate them specifically with that program.
That's a Big Ten thing, man. Like they find their guys and they're like, we're gonna ride this out. We give you a bad year or two, but we're gonna see how you're gonna turn around. It's crazy, man. Where in the SEC, hey, you lost 6 games. Hey, you got boosters showing up at your house. It's just different. That's
Except
all.
for Wisconsin. They decided to kick old homeboy out the other day. I mean, right. Paul Chris, you got to go. We gonna go SEC mode on Paul Chris. Get Jim Littert in here for the rest of the season. Get on out of here, Paul. I was like, man,
it's certainly different.
Who's 58 or whatever to Ohio State? You get out of here, Paul. Like, man,
wow. Yeah, gotta go.
Gotta go. Come off, man.
Well, Katie, as we wind down, we certainly appreciate you coming on. Are you picking a South Carolina victory on Saturday? I don't want to put you on the spot, but
I pick a South Carolina victory in every game
okay.
Because I believe that like it could happen. Realistically, I don't know. If it's a victory, it's not going to be like the last 2 where we won 50-10 against South Carolina State. Like it would be a much closer game. And I think a lot of stuff has to go right. And I do think like they need to start well. And I think they need to just like play cohesively, I guess, versus like one side of the ball is good and then the defense gives up a big score, or the defense holds and then the offense like can't do anything. I think it is conceivable that they could win. I don't know that it's likely that they could win. I would obviously like South Carolina to win. So I have to predict a win, but I am not confident that it would be like a blowout win by any means. And I'm not confident that it would be like a comfortable win. I think it would be a close win if they get one. And I do think a lot of stuff probably has to go right for them.
You have to predict a win?
I have never predicted them to lose. Even the really bad years when like we were winning 2 games a year, I was like, no, this could be the okay. So when Alabama lost to South Carolina in 2010, I was there and I predicted that we were going to win. So now every game I'm like, see, my prediction could be right. This upset could happen. It's not logical. Like, I should not be riding with one prediction that happened to come true over a decade ago, but I'm committed now.
Full disclosure to Vinny, he goes from his head and not from his heart. We've had this discussion before. When I fill out my NCAA tournament brackets, I start with Kentucky winning, and then I work backwards because I'm never, ever filling out a bracket where Kentucky doesn't. It's not in me. It's not in me to do. So that's where I'm coming from. So I'm with you, Katie. You got to be with your team, win, lose, tie, or draw. But see, Vinny is a Dallas Cowboys fan, so he should know you got to just ride with your boys, even if they lose at home to Jimmy Garoppolo. And let me tell you something about Jimmy Garoppolo. Okay, Katie, you know he's fairly attractive. I didn't realize he was attractive till the other day they're playing. My wife come walking through. She said, "Oh, who's that?" I said, "That's Jimmy G." She said, "I've never seen him with his helmet off." I was like, "You need to get to the other room. I don't need you." Because, Vinny, you know what I'm talking about? She's like, when you get that little, like, okay, I'm turning this game. That's enough Jimmy G for you, ma'am. Like, ooh, who's that? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But,
Yep.
we all over the place. But Katie, thank you for coming on. Where can our folks find you on the Twitter streets, and your viral tweets, and your pictures of your dog, the hall snark, the dating thing? Which hey, better you than me. The Vinny doesn't know. Vinny's been married for like 45 years. Vinny doesn't know. He doesn't know about the dating apps. I dabbled after my divorce. I was like, this ain't for me. I'm going to Twitter. That's how bad the dating's at. I was like, let me just see what Twitter's got, because the swiping ain't for me. But
if I could make it work on Twitter and not have to keep swiping, I would follow you right down that path. The dating apps are a wasteland. They're terrible.
But be careful. You may end up moving across the country. But where can folks find you covering South Carolina and just in general? Because you're a pleasant follow. The puns are, sometimes I'm like, okay, that's enough. That's enough. But Adam Jacoby, good friend of the show, is always like, he's a pun guy as well. So where can we find you on the Twitter streets?
To find all that great content that Terry just described on Twitter, it's at KDZWIERZYNSKI. And to find the South Carolina specific stuff and in-game tweets, it's at GABATTACK. That's Garnet and Black Attack, but we just shortened it because it's a lot of words otherwise. So I live tweet those games on the weekend. So on Saturday, I will be cheering against y'all via Twitter.
Okay. And one last question.
Yes.
One last question. So are we going with is it Commander Big Spur, Captain Big Spur? Or are we going with the other name that was floated around for the South Carolina mascot? Vinny, are we a family show? Can I say it? I can say it in context, right?
We know what the nickname is, so what is it?
The Cock Commander. Where are you falling where it comes to because I have to imagine the Gamecocks being the mascot, it opens itself up to a lot.
It does. It does. When I went to school, when I was a freshman, my mom's one rule was do not buy any apparel that has that word on it. Like, you cannot do that. So naturally, the first thing I bought was a shirt with like Cox and giant letters. Because I was like, well, it's school spirit, Mom. It's okay. And even now, like, I went to undergrad there. My sister went to undergrad there. My sister's in grad school there. My mom still, when the stadium does the Gamecocks cheer, no matter what side we're sitting on, my mom will shout game. Because she's like, no, I can't say that other word. But in terms of the naming, I did not personally like Cock Commander as a name. I thought it was dumb. I was glad Sir Big Spur got to stay. I understand why the internet thought it was very funny. And I probably would have thought it was funny if it wasn't my school. I was just like, this is dumb. It's a rooster. Like, it's fine. We're all going to call it Sir Big Spur anyway. But I mean, Cock Commander would have been funny. The student section is called the Cockpit. There are a lot of other jokes and innuendo-y terms because they're college kids and you have them. When Chris Smelly was our quarterback when I was in school, there were unfortunate shirts that said "My cock is smelly." Like, people have co-opted the phrase as they need it, but I am glad we were able to keep Sir Big Spur.
You can't tell, but Vinny's blushing right now.
You knew where that was going when she brought out the name fast and smelly. But I saw the tweet about your mom, and I'm how she wouldn't say it and she would say game. So she's all, I'm not gonna say it, but she knows how you got here. So I'm just saying. Come on now, Mom.
Vinny, wow.
I'm
We get Roy Wood Jr. on here. Now we work in blue, Vinny. Now we work in blue. Okay.
Katie got here. How you got here, and you got siblings as well. So I mean,
all right, Vinny. We know how
we were
things
all
work.
Delivered via stork. That's what I have always.
There we
just showed up one day.
That's right.
Well, Katie, thank you so much. I'm sorry that we kind of started working blue at the very end, but we certainly appreciate you stopping by.
I mean, her school's fault. We didn't do nothing.
I brought up the t-shirts, so I really started us down that path.
Oh yeah, and we'll do this again because, of course, women's basketball, which that was a great game, and the SEC tournament did not bring that up.
Wasn't it though?
It was good. I was surprised that we won, but we've got that, and of course, men's basketball and baseball, and I'm naming off stuff like we're not in the same division, Vinny.
We got
what I'm doing here.
We got them in the SEC tournament. They went on and won the national championship. It worked out for everybody.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
Yeah.
There we go. Well, thank you so much, Katie. Have a great night. We'll see you on those Twitter streets. Is your dog still there?
Yeah, he's here. Let me grab him. You want to say bye? Here. Okay.
There we go. Yeah. Now,
Thanks,
Vinny,
guys.
5 years ago, I would have been like, look at this with the silly dog. Now, current TB, I'm feeding the dog, his treats to his mouth so I don't stress him out too much. I've become that dog parent. I said I wouldn't, but here I am.
Yeah.
All right, Katie, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you on those Twitter streams.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie.
Bye. Look at that.
Yeah, she is a big-time friend of the show. She's made it, like you said, multiple times.
Oh, yeah. Well, with South Carolina playing every time, I don't pay attention to South Carolina until we play them. Yeah. So we need to get a little bit of information. Why am I going to sit and watch a South Carolina game?
Yeah. But
I know if they lose on Saturday, they got to secede. You got to secede from the SEC because that's what they do in South Carolina.
You're right about the Big Ten, though, as far as unless you root for those teams, you can't watch them. Look, I've always felt this way. I would watch Vanderbilt and Mississippi State play football before a higher level Big Ten game. It could be Wisconsin, Iowa. It could be Michigan,
it's not fun to watch.
Indiana, or whatever. But I would watch trash SEC before I watch pretty decent Big Ten football. I'm biased and all, but hey, this is better.
It doesn't work for me. But as we start to wind down, got to bring up Tua.
Yes.
And number one, I just hope the young man is good to go. That's number one. Number two, I'm not going to debate whether or not he should have been out there. Meaning the NFL over the last 10 to 15 years has gotten better about head injuries. We no longer have you got jacked up. We no longer have the VHS tapes of the biggest hits, that kind of thing. My concern is football is just inherently dangerous. And try as we might, and we've tried to keep quarterbacks are doing things different from everybody else. There's specific areas where you can't hit the quarterback, and even with all those protections, things happen. So we can blame the NFL, blame the Dolphins or whoever, but for my money, it's us, the fans. Maybe not specifically with the head injuries, but we want people to play hurt. We demand it. We celebrate those people. Like you and I talk about that Isaiah Thomas in 1988 playing game 6 on that busted ankle. We revere that kind of thing. We talk about Kurt Schilling's bloody sock. We especially hockey people love when people play with collapsed lungs and all this kind of stuff. We demand it. And when we get players that don't sacrifice like we think they should sacrifice, we let them know about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember Kevin Durant last season with the Warriors, at the beginning of those playoffs, we thought he was faking. We thought he should have toughed through. And then he did, and then he ruptured his Achilles tendon.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we demand. We demand this physical sacrifice from our athletes. And that's on us because we don't stop looking away. Even when the NFL and we knew the brain damage, what was going on, we didn't stop watching. We demanded NFL make the product safer. We never turned away from it.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we demand of our athletes. Give us your bodies. But then it turns around, and when at age 40, these people have retired and they can't play with their kids, we forget about them.
Yeah.
When they turn 50 and they are dealing with early onset dementia, we forget about them. When I think it was Real Sports that did a whole thing on the 85 Bears, starting with Dave Duerson, and Jim McMahon, and the Refrigerator Perry. I think that particularly with football players, we see the dudes on those Sunday morning shows that are still in pretty good shape. But have you seen video of Earl Campbell?
Mm-hmm.
Shuffling. Shuffling. And so that's on us. We demand a physical sacrifice. You know, there's this notion of people, well, I played football in high school. Look, okay. Everybody played football in high school. Like, that's not an exclusive club. But it's different than what we're asking of people at high-level college and the NFL. It's just different.
Mm-hmm.
So we demand our athletes almost suffer.
Yeah.
We see them as trade pieces if we want our teams to get better. We see them as things we can control on the PlayStation, people we can trade with the fantasy football. Yeah. We don't see them as athletes or as humans. Mm-hmm. And I get it. Like, oh, they get paid a lot of money. Well, don't get it twisted, particularly when it comes to NFL. The money ain't what you think it is. We know NFL contracts, for the most part, unless you're Kirk Cousins and Deshaun Watson, aren't guaranteed. That is wild to me. Like those two? Anyway, so it's kind of on us. This is what we demand. And so we ask for all this sacrifice. Your knee's not ready? Shoot it up and play. Mm-hmm. We got to win. Shoulder not right? Shoot it up and play. Right? And then after we have indoctrinated these athletes, at this point, when it comes to a head thing, which is something that is hard to quantify, right? At that point, we want them to all of a sudden take it easy and opt out. It doesn't work like that. We have drilled into their brains for years and years and decades. We demand you play hurt. That's what we demand. You've got to put it all on the line for us. You remember how they did Scottie Pippen in The Last Dance? Mm-hmm. With his migraine and his back spasms?
Yep.
Legitimate issues. Most people with migraines don't get out of bed. And he's still trying to play, wasn't able to play, and he's soft.
Yep.
You know, we want this, you know, we want the Ronnie Lotts cutting their fingers off to keep playing. That's what we want. You got to tough it out. Mm-hmm. And we've all seen athletes, arms dangling, you know, gashes. Will Levis, just an Ole Miss, he had his finger was going in a completely unnatural direction. Well, just snap it up, keep playing.
Look like Booger McFarland's.
Right. That's what I'm saying. You look at these old athletes. Look at their hands going every which way. That's what we demand of them.
And the hit Sunday, where he gets pushed back, hits his head, and it's staggering like he just got knocked out in a boxing match trying to go down the field. And they said it was his back. I don't know how you sell that as a back injury. And then to come out again and play on Thursday, a short week, the players, most of them hate playing on Thursday when they're healthy. They hate that Sunday, Thursday turnaround. And, all we see now is 17-game season instead of 16. And everybody's playing Sunday to Thursday and travel to London and do all this, that, and other. And then to take that hit again against Cincinnati, which, I just don't know how you can say he was all right to be out there. Maybe did he insist? But it was just a whole lot of fishy stuff. And you start out 3-0 and you're looking good and it's great. We talked to Roy just a minute about it because he's a Dolphins fan. We didn't dive into it and, maybe sit him out, let Teddy Bridgewater play the whole game against Cincinnati. You got a nice season, but now he's gone for, like we said, he should be a long time before we see Tua again because maybe I think he was kind of rushed back way too soon.
And the thing is, we know what head trauma can do to someone. My hometown's famous son, Muhammad Ali. We knew that too many hits to the head by the time you and I were coming up, and I remember my dad telling me, it's not the same Ali. He's not what he was. We knew that. And then for years, the NFL tried to tell us that grown men, 6'5", 300 pounds, hitting stuff head first wasn't that big a deal. That's what they said. That was their point. Like, what? Oh, he just got his bell rung. Right. Now we know what that leads to. And so the NFL with Junior Seau, with Dave Duerson, with some others, you can't ignore that. So if anything, I don't know what the NFL's procedure is when it comes to head trauma. I know they got independent folks for each team. What does independent mean? We know that words don't always mean the same thing to everybody, right? Like your independent may not be my, what does that mean? What is the policy and procedure? I was shocked that Tua looked as woozy as he did against Buffalo. Yeah. And they let him keep playing.
Yeah.
That
all the progress, usually we don't have that anymore, supposedly.
Right. And that's what about this situation is, because we don't see that. You and I have seen Troy Aikman.
Yeah.
Steve Young get rocked, try to come back like that, but we don't see that anymore. We hadn't until Tua.
Yeah.
So if the NFL, if the Dolphins are saying it was all on the person that they fired, the independent whoever, okay, you how did that happen?
Yeah.
Like there's got to be safeguards in place. Is he the end all be all? There's got to be more to it than that, than just the one person saying, yeah, he's fine.
Right.
When we all saw clearly there was more to it. Clearly there were other things going on.
Yep.
So again, you want Tua to be well. The thing with the fingers, that's what I was okay. I said, y'all got to stop showing this, man. This is a bad situation, but this is what we want. We demand sacrifice. We demand our athletes, particularly football, they're close to gladiators.
Yep.
And so we want them to gut it out, and but the issue with football is it's part of the game. Running into people is part of it. Like that's almost the objective.
Yeah.
It's to run and hit something. Run full speed into something.
Yo.
So
Absolutely.
I don't know what the NFL does from here, but that was a bad look.
Mm-hmm.
How it got to that point, it was just a bad look all around, ending with Tua on the ground like that. But
Now I gotta throw a couple things. Ain't no smooth segue from that, but we mentioned it. You mentioned it a little bit last week. I think I've mentioned it before, but I don't know how we not talked about it more in depth. We had the two comedians on last week. Had Roy Wood Jr., Greg Warren. Y'all go to the BS3 network and watch it on Roku, YouTube, listen on Spotify, Anchor. You copied and pasted a little clip with the ending for what who won the World Series in 2016.
I had to do that for the missus. She was out of town last week, and she was very happy I was doing that. I got to thank Roy. He got me some good husband points with that.
There you go. So you mentioned, I think after Roy hopped off, that you're a big fan of comedians in cars getting coffee. I am too, and we even talked about having, Greg should be on there, Roy should be on there. Have we not talked about how much we both like that series? I've watched pretty much every episode multiple times. Love it. All the comedians on there, from Chris Rock to Don Rickles to Mel Brooks to Steve Harvey. All of them. Super Dave was on there.
Super Dave was hilarious. The thing I love stand-up comedy.
We both do. We should. I think we went and talked about this.
And to me, stand-up comedy, I marvel at it. Because the thing is, if you can sing, you can sing. Stand-up comedy, getting someone to laugh is, to me, it's special, it's unique, it's awesome. It takes a lot more. I can hold up a picture of a sad-looking puppy, and I can get people tears in their eyes. But what is funny? What does that mean? And I love things where comedians explain their process.
Yes.
How do you get from, and I know a lot of people think, oh, they just telling jokes. There's an art to it.
Yeah.
And I've seen different, interviews with comedians, how they work on their joke. And I saw Jerry Seinfeld talk about, how precise he is with word usage, word placement, voice inflection. There's so much to it. And for someone to have enough material for an hour and a half boggles my mind. We've had Charles Moore on the show, who is a funny person. And I saw him last year. He did a show in Louisville, real close to Mama B, so I went. And he was funny. But the issue is, being funny for 5 minutes is hard. Think about how many jokes you have to say in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
How many punchlines you have to get in 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes.
Yes.
And then you see these elite guys have specials that blows my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, think about this. Eddie Murphy did Raw and Delirious within like 2 years of each other. How do you do that? How do you have completely different what?
Yeah.
Because people, well, this comedian fell off, and I'm like, it seems hard. And we've had comedians on here talk about how hard it is. We've had Sinbad on here talk about how hard it is. Roy Wood Jr. last week was talking about how he had to do things to get himself ready for where he is. Right, comedy's hard. Just because you can tell a joke or two doesn't make you a comedian.
Right. So yeah, man, I've watched every single episode of the series. Always was checking Netflix to see if there was new ones. But yeah, so we both huge fans. And speaking of Jerry Seinfeld, got to pour one out for his Mets, who thought they had the NL East wrapped up until they didn't. Come to Atlanta over the weekend and got swept right out of town. Atlanta won the division yesterday, so the Mets go in as a wild card. The Braves go in with a bye. They get the winner of Phillies Cardinals, I think. So all those Mets fans who had so much fun and thought they had the division just wrapped up. Oh, we beat the Braves 4 out of 5 and thought they KO'd Atlanta.
In August?
Yeah, exactly. And here's the thing with us. Tip our cap to the Mets because normally they fold and collapse by the All-Star break. So, hey, props to y'all for making it through an entire season being good. But you still end up, the Mets go Met, and they did. It just took a little bit
longer. They
longer.
absolutely did. And I know there's a lot of Mets fans out there that you want to get in their face, but you're a better person than me.
Yeah.
As a neutral observer, I just thought it was hilarious because, as we were saying before we came on, baseball, you can't crow no matter the situation in August. Beginning of August, my birthday, beginning of August, what are you crowing about? Because things can happen.
It's just now getting ready to start. Come August.
The dog days of summer, it's a true statement.
Yeah. You got to position yourself to get to August, then make your move. It's just not popping in August for baseball.
Right, and that's the thing too. Being a dispassionate baseball fan, I can just step back. I love it. I love the pettiness of NL Central. I love watching the Mets do Mets things.
Yeah.
But speaking of baseball, Aaron Judge is having a historic season.
Mm-hmm.
Historic. What he's not doing is having a record-breaking season.
Right.
Well, it's the AL record. We ain't never done that, Holmes. We ain't never talked about in the NBA, this is the Eastern Conference scoring record. We ain't never done that, Holmes. Never. Even in baseball, it's never been about NL, AL when it comes to these records. Never.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, for the folks at home, folks that might listen, like DJ Cool said, let me clear my throat. Everyone that's saying that Aaron Judge is breaking the real home run record, shut the hell up. What does that mean? I asked that question. People say, well, it's the untainted record. How do you define that? Well, those guys were all juicing. Okay. I will concede that to you. I will also concede that the majority of these old baseball records were set in a period I call segregation, when non-white athletes could not play. To me, those records are tainted. Would Babe Ruth have been Babe Ruth if he had to go against the Pedro Martinez of 1920s? I don't know. If he had to go against prime Satchel Paige every now and then, I don't know. We don't know, and that's the point. You're asking me to get upset about some records that may have been tainted in the 90s that were breaking records I think was tainted in the 20s and the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
So these baseball purists that, I've seen people, oh, Aaron Judge broke the real record. Shut up. Shut up. I don't want to hear it. I've had this discussion with folks here in the great state of Iowa. A lot of baseball folks have this field of dreams mentality, this romanticism about the game of baseball. You don't like Field of Dreams? No. I remember Field of Dreams came on one time. I'm with my dad. I'm like, hey, he said, why am I watching this? Those heroes aren't the ones I grew up with. They couldn't play with those guys. There's no connection there. But they want to romanticize baseball. It's about fathers and sons, and it's this and that. Well, we were excluded, Vinny. People that look like me and you were excluded from that. So I don't have that bond that you might, because people like me couldn't play. And I'm tired of baseball folks always bringing up this purity of baseball before Negroes could play. Any other walk of life, you couldn't get away with it. You couldn't do it. If the Oscars talk about how great it was way back when black folks couldn't win, we would shut that person down because it's stupid. Oh man, this is the best thing. No, you can't do that. You just say, okay, this is what they did. We moved on. Stop revering segregation. Stop it. And then I had a bunch of people in my mentions because I tweeted this. You know how I'd get, I'm bored sometimes. Most of the time I'm sitting on the pot and I'm like, well, let me tweet out this stuff about Barry Bonds. I'm glad Barry Bonds broke the record. I had someone tell me, oh, you have just been brainwashed by the Ken Burns baseball documentary. I ain't never seen 1 minute of that. I was here in 1998. I remember the live look-ins when Sosa and McGuire chasing the record. I was here for that. I was also here in 1998 when Barry Lamar Bonds became the only member of the 400 home run, 400 stolen base club. You know how many people are in it right now?
Just one.
Barry Lamar Bonds.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look back in 1998, ain't nobody talking about when Barry Bonds became one of one. They didn't talk about it then. They don't talk about it now. Never did. It was Sosa McGuire saved baseball. These home runs saved baseball. Not this person who, for my money, Barry Bonds best ball player I have ever seen. Period, full stop. Wasn't anything he couldn't do on the baseball field. And my thing is, if you are the best at whatever you do, and you've done something one person has done out of the how many thousands have played Major League Baseball, you're in a club of one, and you have to stand there while people less talented than you are given these accolades. I'd like to think I would not have done anything. I'd like to think that.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, the temptation would be like, what? Are you kidding me? Imagine Michael Jordan having one of those MVP seasons and all we talk about is, Steve Smith or like, what? Are you kidding? Like, mind-boggling.
Yo.
So then he says, well, you're just excusing Bonds. Nope. No, I'm not. He did what he did. I am not excusing that. What I'm saying is I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And then all these other people profit all of it. But Bonds is the only person that we want to hold accountable for a whole era of baseball. Well, then this person says to me, well, Barry Bonds was a jackass to the media. Okay.
No.
But again, let's look at it in full context. Do we know who Barry Bonds' godfather is?
Willie Mays.
Willie Mays.
Mm-hmm.
So Willie Mays is playing baseball less than a decade after Jackie Robinson breaks the color barrier.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go out on a limb here, Vinny Hardy, and say he went through some things. He was a say-hey kid, but he went through some things.
Him and Bobby said, hey, don't be so trusting of the media.
So that's what I'm getting to. So Barry is that second generation that you and I have talked about before. When we were growing up, it was that second generation in baseball. Ken Griffey Jr. and Barry Bonds and all these kind of guys, the Alou, so we know, I'm not even going to guess. I'm going to say for a fact, Willie Mays went through stuff, particularly with the media. Bobby Bonds went through stuff with the media. So Barry's coming up playing at Arizona State where he's better than everybody else. So now he's got to, when he starts his major league career, he's got to sit in the clubhouse, been interviewed by the same people that were interviewing Willie Mays interviewing. And look, I don't try to go too much into race on this show, but race is a thing. So he's got all these old white dudes coming at him sideways when he knows the fact that he's better than everybody else in this stadium. Yeah, he's going to come a certain way. Yes, he is. Yes, he's going to be defensive because he knows how y'all treated his father and his godfather and everybody else he knows. So yes, he's going to be defensive.
Mm-hmm.
Again, maybe you went too far. I'm just talking about you got to discuss these kinds of things in context. So let me get off my soapbox here. Aaron Judge, great season. He ain't setting no records, man.
No.
That's my 2 cents. But it's ridiculous people falling over themselves. This is the real record. You know how dumb you sound? Well, it's the AL record. Man, who's the leading rusher in AFC history? Do you know? I don't. It's Curtis Martin, by the way. But the point is, that's not the record we celebrate.
Yeah.
That's not what we do. So either you have a reckoning for baseball or you stop this foolishness and you let Bond's record stand.
Yep.
But we love this field of dreams, romanticism about baseball. Lou Moore, who we need to get on to, Professor Lou Moore, his favorite thing is Major League Baseball. They love to remind you that Jackie Robinson used to work here. They won't tell you why it was so significant he did what he did, or why he had to become the first, or why there was a color barrier for him to break. But just know he broke it. We all good now.
Mm-hmm.
Tell the whole story.
Yep.
All right. Got me wound up. Now I need to calm down. Where's my water?
I mean, last 2 things real quick, man.
You got me wound. I got myself wound up on that because it's so dumb.
It is.
It is so dumb. And like, well, yeah, I know there's segregation, but in the discussion, I'm tired of, well, yeah, it was Jim Crow, but no, that ends what we're talking about. I'm tired of people excusing that. Well, that's just how it was. That's dumb as hell. Anyway, sorry, I'm going off, but it's my show. It's my show.
Yeah,
our show. We can talk.
Yeah. The last 2 things real quick. Lost a couple musical giants. One from our era being Coolio at age 59, which happened about right after the show last week. And then a giant, and not a huge country music fan, but a giant from Kentucky in Loretta Lynn, who passed at age 90. So just 2, we love music, but 2 very influential artists that both passed in the past week as well.
Coolio was older than I thought. I don't know what I thought, but
when doing the math, he was early 30s doing his peak.
I thought he was younger than that, but
yeah.
I mean, Coolio had some hits.
Old, 59 ain't old, but he was.
I thought he was. I don't know.
15 years older than us.
But Coolio, yeah, man, that was a big one. I mean, Gangsta's Paradise was the jam of that summer, and he had some other ones. I tell you what, the Monstars theme from the first Space Jam with Coolio and Be Real and LL and Method,
Buster.
Hey, that song goes hard. Like
it has. There's no way it can go soft. If Bus on the track, it ain't going soft.
Yeah,
coming with energy and aha.
Oh yeah, that's right. And that song goes hard. Like I just need to throw that out there. But Coolio, I mean he was great. I think he was in Sharknado? I don't know. He was in some movies like that. But much love to Coolio. But Loretta Lynn, Kentucky's own.
Yeah.
She's out of that Dolly Parton mold of strong women speaking their truths when it's not always comfortable for them to do so.
Yeah.
And I think that gets lost. Well, number one, that kind of thing gets lost by certain people because of the accent by which Loretta Lynn and Dolly Parton speak.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
That Appalachian Kentucky accent, people dismiss out of hand. Let's just be frank about that.
She's from right across the mountain from me, Loretta, and Dolly from right over here in Sevierville. That's the hopping and jumping where I'm at now. So yeah,
so we dismiss them. We dismiss them because the way they glam up and do their hair and makeup is different than what other folks think it should be.
you get looked down on because of how you sound to them.
Yes. And so if you look at that, and people have been sharing some of Loretta Lynn's songs, like we know Coal Miner's Daughter, but there's some other songs speaking about some other things that you go, wow, she wrote this when?
Yeah. And she's 15 years older than Dolly. She was.
Yeah.
You know?
And so the Coal Miner's Daughter, that was the entryway, but she spoke a lot about her experience in the mountains in Kentucky. And she was a trailblazer as well.
Yep.
And we throw that term around a lot, but I'm not a big country music fan. Let me just be upfront with it. I'm be upfront with it. But I think the people that I see talking about, I guess, the bro country, whatever, the Florida Georgia line, whoever else, they miss that era of country where, as my dad used to say, that country music is the blues for white people.
Have substance to it.
Yeah. And if you listen to a lot of those older country songs, they were going through some things.
Yeah.
I mean, when you hear Dolly Parton's version of I Will Always Love You, there's something going on. When you hear those old country songs, I'll prefer old country to the new country.
Yeah.
But Loretta Lynn, she's one of those few people. I'm going to do it my way, and I'm going to stay true to who I am, where I'm from. So I tip my hat to those folks.
Mm-hmm.
She never forgot she was from Kentucky.
Nope, sure did.
And to me, that's always the mark of I don't want to say a great person. I love it when people don't forget where they came from. Mm-hmm. Loretta Lynn never did. Look back, Muhammad Ali never did. Traveling the world, but anyway, Loretta Lynn, just a beautiful life, a beautiful voice. Not exactly my cup of tea, but I have to respect the way she went about it and the way she represented my home state. So, yeah, that's tough. And Coolio's Coolio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Just had to mention those two things real quick before we hopped out of here. But man, we got another fun show. Katie Dzwierzynski came on here and was great as always. We got the Ole Miss recap.
But she's gonna be sad.
Yeah,
she's gonna be sad come Saturday. So
because we're gonna be 5-1 after Saturday night,
but at least she understood where it's coming from. Like, stop picking South Carolina. Mm-hmm. Stop it. Stop trying to make it happen.
I gotta tweet at GAB Attack now that we know it's gonna be her live tweeting from that account on Saturday. I have to interact with her during the game since she's gonna be running that for them. But man, we had a blast. Appreciate Katie. Appreciate you, TB.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say something about the home run chase, and
yeah,
it's so. I'm gonna calm down, but it's absolutely so ridiculous, man. Like and people, they go the real one. Like, come on. And one more thing too. So I said all that about the segregation records. You got to look at that. So I had a Louisville person. I don't know if you know Howie Lindsay. He's in the Louisville media circles.
Okay.
And he said, yeah, you're right. But what about 1948, 1949, 1950, or 48, 49, 51, 58? And I said, I see what you're doing here.
Uh-huh.
I have been very clear. I have said repeatedly when it comes to Kentucky, do I count those? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But you and I always say that's part of Kentucky was good during segregation. We're good during integration, one and done. Like, okay, I acknowledge that. I always have. I'd be an idiot not to.
Mm-hmm.
But then he said, well, I said it on my show and, people got angry. People get angry because Louisville fans don't say that. They're not coming from a good place with it. They're trying to say somehow the University of Kentucky
Mm-hmm.
and the other 119 counties are somehow extra racist versus Louisville. That's what they try to frame it as.
Mm-hmm.
I know back in the day when I went to school, I grew up a Louisville fan. When I decided I was going to Kentucky, it was almost like Terry's joining the Klan. I mean, seriously, I've had conversations with Derek Anderson about this. Like, I've had conversations even up until that was the mindset. So I remember being at a family gathering with my parents way back when. And my dad's point is this. Because everybody likes to point to, well, look at Adolph Rupp. If he was racist or not racist. My dad's point is, if black people couldn't go to institutions or work for institutions or go to a business that at one time had a racist employee, what could we do? Right. You can't mess with the federal government, state government. What business could you go to?
Mm-hmm.
There's that.
Yo.
Also, the Louisville folks that try to Kentucky's extra racist. You got to sell that bleep to somebody else. I was born and raised in Louisville. My father was born and raised in Louisville. He went to a segregated high school in Louisville. When he graduated from high school, he couldn't go to U of L or UK because Lyman Johnson hadn't done his thing yet. That's that. Yo. Well, TB, Louisville is much more progressive. Sell that to somebody else. In 1972, Vinny, my father sued the city of Louisville and the Louisville Police Department for discrimination. So you sell that to somebody else when you're sitting here thinking that you're better because you're in Louisville than the rest of Kentucky.
Right.
Sell that to somebody else that doesn't know the history. And as my dad says, or used to say, God rest his soul, he's been an N-word in Louisville. He's been an N-word in Lexington. It sounds the same to his ear.
Yo. And if Louisville was born in 48, 49, 51, and 58, the same rules, the same questions would still present themselves.
And what I always bring up now, it was 5 years ago that I got to meet Mr. Nate Northington, one of the 4 people to integrate SEC football. And Vinny, where did they integrate SEC football? What school was that?
It was University of Kentucky.
So stop telling me my school is racist when they integrated SEC football in the 60s. Stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Stop. You want to point to Texas Western and all that Disney foolishness. See, that's how Kentucky is. But yet we integrated SEC football, which SEC football has been SEC football for 100 years. It wasn't easy. Mr. Nate will tell you. He came on our show.
Sure
He'll tell you it wasn't easy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my point. Stop trying to paint. You don't come from a good place with it, Louisville fans. What about 1948? Damn it, I know. When Kentucky won those NCAA championships, I know the makeup of the team. I know these things. I'm not an idiot, but you're not coming from a good place with it.
Right.
You want to point your fingers. Oh, Kentucky's extra racist. Man, Benny, I've been an N-word in both places too. in my hometown, in my home state,
in the city, in the rural,
yeah, it is what it is. And and that's what I've told people. Like, look. I said I was going to wind down. I need some more water. But my point is, if you are Black in America, some things are just universal. You got to deal with some stuff, whether it's small town or big city. Like, there's just things you got to keep your head on the swivel. I'm not going to get into all that because I don't want to take it off of the sports. But don't hit me with, well, you're talking about those records. What about Kentucky? Damn it, I've addressed that. I will continue to address that.
Yeah.
Well, Kentucky, I know.
Howie, you ain't slick, Howie.
Yeah, then you're gonna be like, well, I know what you was trying to do. I'm not an idiot. Mama B, Papa B didn't raise no fool. Don't be throwing that. No, you're not just saying. I know what you're trying to do. I'm not an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, what a great show. I need to relax.
Yeah, man. Relax.
I need to take a bubble bath.
That'll do the trick, man. That'll do it. We'll have another fun one next week and talk about this and more topics. Try to have some guests on and do what we do. But we appreciate everybody that listens. Appreciate everybody that watches on the BS3 network. Appreciate that we're part of this network. Can be on the Roku devices and the Roku TV and in people's earbuds and whoever wants to check it out and pass it along to your friends. We definitely appreciate it. So we'll hit this outro and see everybody next Wednesday. But TV, man, go exhale real quick and you and Sammy. We'll holler at everybody next time. Appreciate y'all watching. Appreciate y'all tuning in. See y'all next Wednesday on Cast Talk Wednesday.
It's time.
Whoops, wrong intro. Look at me. Wrong stuff. Here we go.
I'm all over the place.
Here we go. Outro. My bad.